Starting now. Okay, welcome to Conducting a Diversity Audit in Your School Library. I am Ann Reyes-Frazee. I'm a high school librarian in Southeast Portland. I'm also the OASL Region 4 rep and the incoming OASL president. So looking forward to that new adventure. You'll see in the upper right-hand corner of all of the slides, or the bottom right hand corner of all of the slides, the tiny URL to this slideshow. You can follow that URL to find these slides that I'm sharing with you today. It always bugs me when they leave it to the very end of the slideshow, because sometimes you have to pop out before the slideshow is done. So I'm just giving it to you right up front. I made that tiny URL div audit, like diversity audit, and then I realized later that it is also like diva audit. So just a little bit of diversity audit fun. Totally understandable, Pia. I'm so glad you're here. And feel free to contribute in the chat or just listen and participate in that way. The slides are available for all of you to take a peek at any point during this presentation. I'm going to have a hard end at 2 p.m. So yeah, I'm here at school teaching today as well. So as all of you, yeah, it's always always an adventure. Okay, here we go. Hi, that's me. I'm a teacher librarian and I'm pretty heavily involved in OASL. I'm a children's and middle grade and young adult book reviewer for Kirkus as well. And then on the national scene, I'm involved with ALSC, a division of ALA, the American Librarians in Service to Children, and I work with their Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Task Force. Feel free to email me if something comes up for you, or if you want to dig into something a little bit more. There'll be time for questions at the end, but I'm also available over email if you want any of these resources. I've tried to include them with copious links in the slideshow as well. But if anything comes up, reach out over email anytime. All right, you can find us on Franklin Library PDX Instagram or the Franklin Library on TikTok as well. We're dipping our toes into TikTok over here. Okay, so what is a diversity audit? You signed up for the webinar, so you might have some knowledge already, but just for some common language, diversity audits are data-driven. It's, an audit. I think we're all familiar with kind of like what an audit looks like. And a diversity audit is specifically looking for data around identity. So ethnic, racial, religious, gender spectrum, neurodiversity, quite a few different socioeconomic status. Really, you can drill down into all the ways that diversity shows up in your patronage. A diversity audit can address those kind and it empowers you, the librarian, to develop your collection and kind of inventory where your gaps might be, where your strengths are, and whose voices are at the table and whose voices could use some amplification. All right. So why would you do a diversity audit? I think we're all in the library field, and we're all big information people. I always feel like more information is better. If I can get to know my collection on a deeper level, having that information can just inform. I personally, and I'm gonna own this, I feel like my collection is like has great representation and diversity, and because I buy, like, really intentionally buy a lot of different diverse books, having that data in my hands really let me know where my own where I could do a better job, and it really let me know like what the work is that we still need to do. Like, I know, I've been in this library for 2 years, and 2 years of purchasing isn't going to fully round out a collection that's been in development for, my school is 100 years old. So 2 years of me purchasing isn't gonna round out a collection perfectly that's been in development for, decades and decades. So having that hard data when I get a little bit of money or some unexpected money, or I'm writing grants, I can use that data to really hone in on the representation that I'm looking for. We all know, as librarians, that representation matters. Our students, our readers just absolutely have to have access to materials that reflect them and their intersectionality, their multiple identities. And our students need to be reading about people who aren't exactly like them as well. That's it's just fundamental as a global citizen, as a developing mind. We need representation in our libraries. I'm the only selector for my collection. And I know that I have bias and personal preferences that are coming into play when I'm making those purchasing lists. So having that data in my hands also like keeps me really honest. Like I can say like, oh, I'm so good. But like as a cisgender woman, as a Latina, I'm showing up, and it's showing up in my purchasing list too. I have favorite authors and I have authors I don't prefer, and having that data in hand really really doesn't let me like kind of get comfortable. And PTA admin, everybody loves data. I love sharing this data, even though, I was hoping that my data, well, we'll get to it, but I was hoping my data would be this like beautiful rainbow of like perfectly, measurable, like beautiful data. And my data is messy. And that's important too. It's not a perfect process, but I do have something in my hand that I can take to the PTA and ask for a little bit of extra cash and say, here's what our student body looks like, and here's what our collection looks like. Can I get some extra money to beef this up? And I'm finding that really helpful. So here at Franklin High School, we've got a little over 13% of our students are receiving special education services. 10% of our students self-identified as being multi-ethnic. Almost 19% of our students are Latina. Almost 5% of our students are Black. A little over 11% are Asian. And then a little over 1% of our student body identifies as non-binary or transgender. So we've got a lot of different, and these categories, aren't mutually exclusive. Intersectionality at our school, we've got a lot of people who identify in many different ways, but that's what our student body looks like here at Franklin. So here's where I started. I created a Google form, and I've got links to that here in the slideshow. The Google form asked students to scan a barcode, the barcode of the book first, and then I asked multiple questions about that book, including what is the author's race or ethnicity, what is the racial or ethnic identity of the main character, any religious representation that shows up in the book, the gender identity of the author, economic representation. I also asked questions about neurodiversity, size diversity. Hey, Amy, in the bottom right-hand corner of this slide, you can see the tiny URL for this slide deck. I also asked questions about disability and immigrant or refugee experiences as well. So I started out, I've got, at the high school level, I've got over a dozen teaching assistants. These are teens who spend time with me in the library. I've got TAs. So that was my squad. That's who I asked to support me in this. As one librarian, this would have been challenging without some help, but I've got some ideas. If you are one person solo, I think a fifth grader could do this. I think a group of students could do this with that training and that scaffolding. I don't think it needs to be a team thing. I don't think it needs to be an adult volunteer thing. I think you've got you've got people in your building who can help you with this, or you yourself could tackle this solo. And I've got ideas for that too. So stay tuned. Okay, so I started with the calibration training with my student helpers. We kind of just got some common language. I'm like, okay, so, oh, pardon me. The end of lunch. I really broke out what I meant by each category. So I said, you know, when I'm talking about size diversity, I'm looking for main characters who might identify as fat or overweight or obese, and that needs to be explicit in the book. When I'm talking about economic representation, I asked them not to assume, if it wasn't explicitly stated in the book, I asked them not to assume that somebody was middle class. I just said, you know, leave it blank. So we went through a couple of books together and filled out the Google form together. All of my TAs are juniors and seniors. And then they touched every single physical book on the shelf in our fiction section. I asked them each to do a different section so that we wouldn't just be doing the same books over and over, but having them scan that barcode at the beginning of the Google form. Also, when I broke it out into a Google sheet, I deleted any duplicate barcodes that were in there. So each book was only audited one time. I do think that a 5th grade student, even a 4th grade student, I think we all have at the elementary level, you know, we've got some like students who are eager to help, students who are, you know, who have the ability to support in that way. And I think this could be a really cool student project. It felt really important to me to have students. This was my TA's complete work for a grade in the library. So this was a unit that we did on it. I had them read articles, the New York Times article that's linked later in this slide deck. I had them read articles about diversity in publishing and diversity in children's books. The iconic School Library Journal article about representation in children's books. And then they had a discussion about it. That was part of their grade for this unit. And then this hands-on activity was a portion of their grade as well. I think that if you were doing this by yourself, you could do a modified audit. Even while you're doing library inventory, you could do every 5th book, you could do 2 books per shelf, you could do a random collection of books from your fiction or nonfiction section, and then extrapolate that data to kind of apply to your whole collection. I think there's ways to do it even if you don't have a lot of student help or adult volunteer help. And I'll address that again later in the slideshow. If there was no information, so I asked, you know, students looked at like the book jacket for author information. If there wasn't a picture of the author or it didn't say in the author bio, or if they were just unclear about the kind of gender or ethnic identity of the author, I asked them to Google it and get more information. And my students touched over 1,100 fiction books and filled out a Google form for each and every one. Took a couple weeks. Okay, so here's my results. Authors were overwhelmingly white, so almost 68% white. You can see kind of the other ethnic breakdowns there. 6% Latinx, Hispanic, almost 10% Black, and then 7% Asian American Pacific Islander identities. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. I made a copy of that Google form. I linked it in the slides. And it sounds like I didn't update the sharing settings, but yes, my intention was for everybody to have access to that Google form so that you can make your own copy, or, you know, you could probably make a better copy too. But I do want you to be able to see those questions. So I will update the sharing settings. Thanks for letting me know, Amy. Okay, so then on the right, you can see the main character of the book, their racial or ethnic identity. So you can see that authors were almost 70% white, and then the ethnic identities were about 46.5% white, 1.5% Middle Eastern, 6.3% Latinx Hispanic, 27% unknown. When I'm reviewing books for Kirkus, if the race or ethnicity is not stated or described in the book, we say that the characters are assumed white. In American literature, there's a white default for characters. And sometimes authors are like, oh, I was picturing that person was, you know, Hispanic, or I was picturing that character was XYZ. If it's not explicitly stated in a book, then the characters can be assumed white. Okay, so Black characters were made up 11% of the characters in our books. We also discovered that actually quite a wide array of religions were represented in books that had a religious element. I asked students to leave it blank if there was no mention of religion at all. About half of the books that mentioned religion had a Christianity component. Almost 17% included Islam, 12% Judaism, 2.4% Quaker, which was, yeah, there was a lot of Quaker representation in the young adult collection, and then around 5% Mormon. Other religions were just about 5% as well, and then a high representation of cults as well, because you know, young adult books got to have that drama. Okay, economic representation is there as well, and then other representation. All right, passing period is over there. We had 58 books featuring main characters with LGBTQIA plus identities, 51 books with size diversity, 44 books with immigrant or refugee experience representation, only 4 books with neurodivergence, 15 books featuring folks with disabilities, and then 3 books that had wolf-human hybrids. That felt significant to my TAs when they were filling this out. And it also it was interesting to me to see that neurodivergence and wolf-human hybrids had almost the same representation in our collection. So very informative to me for kind of where we're headed next with collection development. Gender, most of our authors, or like a majority of our authors, identified as female. Fewer than 40% of the authors in my collection are male, and then less than 0.5% or non-binary or transgender. Main characters did not reflect that. The main characters were closer to 50-50 on female, male, and still under 0.5% on non-binary as well. Okay, so major limitations. As you can see, the perspectives, individuals are going to have different perspectives on what types of identities feel important to include. So at the top, you can see my gray bars. Those are the identities that I put into the spreadsheet. And then there was a spot for other, and my TAs, you know, felt there were some books that had, you know, it was like a multi-ethnic person who was Cuban and Greek, and included that in other. Then you can see there's some overlap as well. So dragons, it felt important to include dragon identities, and then several different kind of one-off, depending on kind of what they put in as in that other category. It would, you know, if it wasn't the exact same terminology that somebody else used, it would create its own category for it. So this person, or my TAs, included Jewish under identity as well, outside of the religion question as well. So some limitations to that. I think different students were coming to the audit with different kind of understanding of what our goals or purpose was. We had a conversation about it, but as you can see, a lot of kind of supernatural identities were included in the Google form, which I certainly wasn't looking for data on that, but they included it. Anything that was checked out at the time of the audit was not included in the audit as well, which is a little bit tricky. I'll talk about some options for using tidal wave for a diversity audit as well, which can help with that issue. And then identity is just so subjective. I had some students who got really into the into the audit and spent, 5 to 10 minutes on each book. And I had some students who just kind of flew through it. So I guess the fidelity of the data is, I think it's open to interpretation. I don't believe that this audit is like perfect in any way, shape, or form. It's just kind of a starting point. And I learned a lot for next time, which I'll share as well. Significance of this data to me and my collection. White authors are writing, Black, Indigenous, people of color are writing those characters. We are trying really hard to have books that are featuring characters that have the identity, same identity of the author, or identities that the authors are familiar with. This fits with our publishing data. Most published authors historically and today are white people. I think the number of by POC authors is growing. The number of books that represent by POC voices is growing. So this didn't feel surprising to me, but it did confirm it did track with that kind of national data about what types of books are available. In my library, Latinx authors and protagonists were underrepresented. The percentage of books on my shelves featuring Latinx voices was much lower than the number of students at my school, or the percentage of students at my school who identify as Hispanic or Latinx. Same thing with Asian American Pacific Islander identities, much lower on the shelves than in the seats in classrooms at my school, with both authors and characters. Supernatural characters were more represented than neurodivergent characters in my library. Fantasy books are very popular. I think there's a lot of options where you can do both, or there's a lot of now, especially a lot of books, fantasy books that also feature diverse characters. So I'm really focusing on bringing those into the shelves as well. Just across the board, very low representation of disability experience in my collection, and then gender diversity was low for both authors and characters as well. So very informative to me. Because I said earlier in the presentation, I feel like I purchase a lot of diverse books, and that we have a lot of diverse books get checked out, and a lot of books featuring diverse protagonists and themes and characters are on display. And I have so much room for improvement. I have so much room to get more diversity in there. Okay, so like I mentioned before, there are some tools in Tidal Wave. So I'm thinking really hard, how do I get an idea about what's not on the shelf? I'd like to believe that like our most popular and most fabulous diverse books are just checked out all the time and weren't present in that audit. That's possible. And I know certainly a lot of them are checked out because that's, newer books in our collection and more exciting books in our collection. But to get a really good idea of kind of everything, there are tools in Tidal Wave, which also might be helpful if, if physically handling every book in your collection isn't an option for you. If your school uses Follett Destiny as their circulation system, Tidal Wave has a couple of tools for analysis. You can break down a purchasing list before you buy it to see ethnic, religious, gender identity, and sexual orientation diversity in your purchasing list before you purchase. And then if you notice like, oh gosh, I didn't buy anything featuring Native authors or Native characters, you could add something to your list. Or if you notice like, oh gosh, everything I'm buying is kind of geared toward Hispanic, I don't know, there's I think a couple different ways you could use that information. You can also use the title-wise analysis in Follett Destiny to break up your collection. It shows you, there's a couple of steps in that. So I've added that, excuse me. I've added the toolbox link in the bottom left, and that's got like a bunch of PDFs for how you upload your collection to title-wise. and analyze it, and then how you get the information. You can load it into a spreadsheet. If you're a spreadsheet person, get really fancy with that. You can also, you can sort it out by a bunch of different categories, which I'll show you. My caveat with this is that the title-wise analysis is really only as strong as the cataloging. I feel like I see like funky subject tags in there for some of my books all the time. I ran my title-wise analysis, and like a lot of books that are newer weren't included in the title-wise analysis, or like some books where I'm like, obviously that's a book that represents, ethnic diversity, just wasn't on the list. So it's, it's not perfect either. I think maybe you could use both methods in conjunction with each other to just get the most information. Newer titles are sometimes excluded. There were some categories that I didn't think of including, and a couple that were just totally irrelevant to me as well. So in the bottom right-hand corner is a YouTube video. I set it to start about halfway through when the good stuff starts. So don't watch, you can watch the beginning if you want, but the good stuff starts about 14 minutes in. And he really is sharing his screen, walking you through the title-wise diversity data and how to get access to that. So here's what mine looks like. These are 3 different screens, and I just put them all on one slide. So you can scroll down and just see in your title-wise, it says that I have a 38% of my collection is diverse, and that the average age of my diverse books is 2007. That's about 10 years newer than my collection as a whole collection. So that's significant. I think it means, that I've been purchasing a lot of new books that represent diverse identities. But then if you look at the topics, they kind of break it down. There was one, like folklore is considered a diverse topic in this, which I don't, I think it can be, but they kind of lumped that all in as a diverse topic. This title-wise analysis also includes abuse as a diversity topic, which I didn't include in my Google form. And then you can see diverse families, discrimination and prejudice is included there. So things that I didn't look for in my Google form diversity audit. And then on number 3 over here, if you click on any of these topics, it shows you the titles in your collection that fall under that topic. So you can see this is the beginning of it starts with nonfiction, and I had 5 pages of books that had been tagged in tidal wave as African American. So here's where I'm at. Here's where I'm headed with my next steps. I am gonna definitely need to hone those Google form questions. It's not that I don't want to hear about vampire identities. It's just that wasn't the goal of this diversity audit. And I do appreciate my teens and their kind of like sense of wanting to be thorough. But I think I might do a drop-down menu instead of a free form. And then if they come across something that's not included in my drop-down menu, I can always add it from my end. I think it was I made some assumptions about what they would include or not include, and they really went for it and included so many different categories that kind of maybe just weren't all relevant to what we were looking for. Okay, thanks, Amy. All right. I think next I'd like to audit my graphic novels. That's a high touch section. Those get checked out quite a bit, and I think that there's a lot of room in that section for improved representation, biographies as well. Nonfiction I think might be a little tricky because there's a lot of stuff in the nonfiction section that is not about humans, but I think it's important to kind of have an idea. I might break it out by Dewey. And just do maybe like just the 900s or just the 300s, something like that. I haven't fully formed that idea yet. Using this audit data, I'm definitely already using it to guide my purchasing decisions. I'm seeking out transgender authors. I'm seeking out more LGBTQIA+ material. And then I'm also using it when I'm thinking about weeding. So rather than just relying on circulation data, I think relying on that diversity data is important. Maybe there's a book, there's not very much representation about a specific identity, and it's on the chopping block for weeding because it's not circulating, but I think it would be worth keeping it so that identity is still feeling represented in your collection. If it's not a good book, like if it's not checking out because it's a crummy book, by all means get rid of it. But if it's just not checking out because there's other stuff in your collection that's kind of obscuring this title or making it so that it's not really front and center, maybe hang on to it and think about displays or something like that. For you, if a full audit of a full section feels unrealistic based on time and energy, and I completely get that, I don't think I would have done it this way if I didn't have some student support. I think you could do a random sample of one of your sections and then extrapolate that for the whole, for the rest of the collection. I think you could, take, I wouldn't take like just one letter of the alphabet, but maybe like a little bit from each shelf, or you could even just audit what's getting checked out, like audit what's in your returns bin. I think there's a couple different ways you could do that. Incorporate those anti-racist practices into your policies, programs, and collection. When you're thinking about who your collection is serving and what types of messaging your collection is upholding, look at those policies, look at those programs, and look at your collection through that anti-racist lens. So what can we do to support our BIPOC readers? And then how can we kind of, how can we move forward in making our libraries into spaces that truly serve all of our patrons? Representation is a big piece of that. Recognizing that all representation is not positive representation is important. Being mindful of the content and stereotypes. So like for me, having a Latino main character isn't enough to stay on my shelf. If it's a crummy book, it's got to go. And by crummy, I mean, it's using outdated and racist language. It's using, it's got stereotypes that are happening in that book that don't serve our students. It's not getting checked out. It's, when we're thinking about representation, we want to go beyond kind of those struggle books. We want to have casual diversity as well. I want to see characters that are, representative of different ethnicities and gender identities, who are also, in the school play and who are doing crafts with their friends and are interested in robots. I don't want all of my representation to be kind of about really narrow identity and like, associations with different historical representations. I want a wide variety in my diversity and representation as well. All right, so as you're kind of thinking about diving into a diversity audit, consider your displays. Maybe before you jump into a diversity audit, something easy to do is auditing your displays. As you're selecting the materials to include in your displays, kind of consider what the representation looks like. Maybe you're creating displays that represent religious holidays. When you're doing that, whose voices are being amplified and whose voices are being excluded. I don't think that displays featuring ethnic diversity should just be during those heritage months. I think all displays all the time should always be as diverse as possible. Maybe create thematic displays instead of kind of like holiday-based displays or displays about a specific heritage month, a thematic display about friendship or creativity. I did a display about inventors that had some awesome diversity in it. Looking at what's being included in your displays can be a kind of a great way to start your diversity audit. Audit those storytime selections. 80% of the books you read during story time should include diverse protagonists. Diversity can look a lot of different ways, but kind of, that intentionality, I think, around the selections is really important. And then that question, like, can a collection be too diverse? You know, what if your student body isn't actually very ethnically diverse or religiously diverse? Can the collection be like more diverse than your student body? Sure. I feel strongly that students are always going to gravitate towards engaging high quality literature when it's made available to them. There is so much engaging high quality diverse literature that's available for purchase. I think we just need to get it into students' hands. So we, as the gatekeepers of these libraries, we are responsible for making that literature available. A diverse collection, I think, is beneficial to every student, no matter their background or identity. And then this is something that I'm thinking about constantly, especially with kind of censorship and intellectual freedom at the forefront of all of our minds right now. Think about that soft censorship. Are you avoiding purchasing specific books because you think they might be controversial? Are you worried that the books that you might be purchasing will cause, you know, some adults in your building or outside of your building to raise their eyebrows and question you? Have a strong collections policy in hand. Have support from your district and your colleagues. I have fallen into this before as well, of like, well, you know, if I buy this and put this on display, am I ready for the conversation that might come after that? I think it's important to confront that discomfort and work through it and walk through it, and avoid, you know, depriving our students of materials because I'm personally uncomfortable with it, or because I'm uncomfortable with, or because I have fear that it's going to be questioned. So I'm walking through that and purchasing things that I know my students are going to identify with and enjoy, even if it might lead to an uncomfortable conversation later. Okay, so I've got resources for you as well. Okay, the Diverse Book Finder is a fabulous tool for finding all kinds of high quality books on a variety of different diverse identities. They've got just a fantastic resources for you. The Teen Librarian Toolbox is a fantastic blog. They did this like resource dump on any sort of like a 3-part resource dump. If you are just like a more information is better kind of person, because we all are, jump into that resource roundup and you will find a little bit of everything in there, and some other people who've done it some different ways. If you're a spreadsheet person, jump into that toolbox because there are a lot of spreadsheets in there. We Need Diverse Books is iconic. Lots of resource lists for different high quality books. I look on there pretty frequently when I'm noticing that we need more books in a certain category or certain kind of, if I'm wanting to find some high quality representation. Reading is Resistance is kind of a book club type of activity. They've got reading guides and their book recommendations are always fantastic. This is a link again. The video guide for accessing that title-wise diversity analysis is there. I think he walks you through it, and I'm a visual learner, so I think watching the video helped me figure out where all the little clicks are. Project Lit is another just fantastic kind of book club, high quality representative literature for middle readers and high school and elementary as well. Project Lit is a great starting point for looking for book recommendations. A little bit of further reading. School Library Journal has just an amazing article out about just kind of the nuts and bolts of diversity auditing. Kelsey Bogan, who you might be familiar with, did a multi-part series in her blog about diversity audits and how she did it. She did it differently than I did as well, but she gets into the spreadsheets. And I liked this article because it was like, I want to do a diversity audit, but I have no time, which I think we can all relate with. And she had some really good suggestions that might work for you as well. ALSC has their blog, just a super basic step-by-step about how to conduct a diversity audit and what to do with the data. And then another article from the Teen Librarian Toolbox, questions and answers. So they had the blog out about diversity audit, and then Q&A about people that people have asked, and then might be some of your same questions as well. Okay, so that's me. I'm Anne. Feel free to email me, of course, but of course, Franklin Library PDX on Instagram. I did share my diversity audit data on my Instagram page, full transparency. I shared it with my principal. I shared it with on Instagram. I shared it with folks at a PLC. I just, I want that accountability piece. Like, I have work to do with this collection, and I don't want it to kind of like fall to the back burner. I want people to ask me, like, whatever happened with that diversity audit? What's it looking like these days? And I fully plan to do this again and compare and contrast, and see how things are looking next year too. Franklin Library on TikTok. At this point, I'd love to answer any questions that you have. I'm gonna pop into that Google form right now to make the Google form public so that you can see it. I think it's probably only available for folks who are in my district right now. Okay, feel free to put questions in the chat, or you can raise your hand, or just unmute and just jump right in there.